The American Garage gets a truck. Yeah, it doesn't run. So let's do a project. So welcome back to the American Garage. As you can see, we're getting started on our new project, fixing the truck. Phase 1, let's make the truck run. Now the first thing that we're going to have to do is to figure out what is wrong with the truck. Now this truck has been sitting in a barn for quite a while, still smells like the barn, and the owner who had it before took it part way apart and didn't end up fixing it. What they said was that the timing was off. Now this being electronic ignition, my doubt is on the timing itself, on the spark plugs. So we're going to look at the timing belt. Okay, so now as we take a closer look at the truck, I'm noticing a few things. Number one is the cover to the timing belt is missing. So obviously somebody's been in there messing with it. So I'm looking around and I look real carefully, and my first thought is, first let's line up the marks on the gears to see if they line up in the right place and tell us that the timing is on or not. But as I look closely, I notice that the timing belt has jumped over here. It's not in the grooves. It is over on this side, but not over on this side. So that tells me that the timing is on the timing belt is probably off. Now this engine is a non-interference engine, so if the timing belt does skip, it won't damage the valves. So that's good news for us. Now what we're going to do is I'm going to dig in here a little bit more, and we're going to remove the timing belt because this one looks like it's in pretty bad shape, and we're going to replace it while we're at it. Now there may be more things wrong with this truck, but let's start with the things that we know are wrong. Step 1, disconnect the battery. We're going to remove the battery and charge it while we're working on the truck. Out comes the upper radiator hose. Off comes the serpentine. Remove the fan shroud. Remove the fan and the water pump pulley. Drain the cooling system and remove the upper radiator hose. Remove the thermostat housing and the gasket. So I removed the thermostat housing so that I could get the timing belt off, but I'm looking at it and the thermostat's not looking so great. We'll just plan to replace this one. We'll freshen up the thermostat housing while we're here. We're going to need to rotate the engine to top dead center on number 1, which is the very first cylinder. So I'm going to have to remove my spark plug wires and take a spark plug out so I know when we get to top dead center number 1. Alright, now you're going to love this. I found a major problem with why this car wasn't working. When I went to take the spark plug wires off so that I could check to see when number 1 cylinder is at top dead center, I made note of where the spark plugs were connected. There are 2 coil packs, one for the right side, one for the left side. Now, on the right side, the coil pack, according to the manual, should have an order of 4, 1, 2, 3 going from the right hand corner on around, and it was at 3, 1, 4, 2. The left coil pack should be 1, 2, 3, 4, and it is at 3, 2, 4, 1. So you can see this is going to be a major problem, and this engine would have never run like this. So we're going to take all the wires off, maybe get new ones if we need, and put it back together with the right spark plugs and the right wires. Okay, so I'm going to remove all the spark plug wires. They're not in any of the right places. There we are. There's the number 1 cylinder on the right side spark plug. So we'll examine all the spark plugs while we're at it too. Okay, so far we've discovered that the timing belt had jumped. It needs to be replaced anyway. The spark plugs were not connected to the right wires, so we had the wrong firing order. The thermostat looked pretty bad, so we're gonna slate it for a replacement. And my spark plugs aren't looking too great, but we'll see if we can clean these up. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the engine to top dead center. I'm going to use a little rod to help me find when the piston comes up to the top of the cylinder. And I'm turning the engine clockwise. Watch as the piston comes up and my marks line up, and there we are, top dead center. Okay, the bolts for the main crank pulley, there's 4 of them. Out comes the main crank pulley. We've got the car mostly disassembled. I got the main pulley flywheel off, which came off with these 4 little bolts. And I got the main bolt out of the main crankshaft. Now, the assembly behind the pulley needs to come off, so we're going to use a harmonic balancer puller to get the thing off. My wheel puller, my harmonic balancer puller installed on this piece, and you can see it right here. Now we're just going to turn it and remove the rest of the hub assembly. Now when we do this, we have to be real careful not to poke any holes or damage our radiator. A couple more turns and it should come off. And off the unit comes. Don't forget to take the crankshaft position sensor out before you can get the belt out. We've got everything out of the car. Let's prepare to put things back together. Now the first thing we want to do is we want to make sure we take our Scotch-Brite. We want to make sure that the surface surrounding the thermostat housing is clean so we get a nice tight seal when we go back with the new gasket. Now we've got the front of the engine all cleaned up, and I took off the backside of the timing belt cover because we had to get the crankshaft position sensor wire out of there because the old one was bad. And this is the new one, and we're going to have a problem with this because this connector, this gray connector on the end, has got to go into this hole down on the side of the engine, and the hole is smaller than this connector here. But I'm going to show you how to take this apart so that we can get it through the hole and put it back together on the other side. So here is the old connector I had cut off, and in the back it has this rubbery gasket piece that you have to dig out, and you have to just be real careful, but you pull this one out, and then in the front there is this red thing, and you need to pull this out. This locks all the little wires in place. And what we're going to do is we're going to pull each of these little wires out. Now we're going to do it on the new one, but I'm going to show you how it's done on the old one first. So when you pull your old one off, if you want to experiment with your old one like I did, then you can do that. So let's do this. Let's first take out just one wire so you can see how it works. Now inside there are 4 connectors, they're round connectors, and when you look down on the inside you will see there's these little tabs that hold them in place. And so what we're going to do is we're going to choose one of the wires. I'm going to choose the blue one, and I'm going to push up with it with my fingers and hold it while I run down and open the little tab. And when I do, it's probably going to take a couple of times, but when I get it, I think I got it, I should be able to pull the wire out. So once I get it out of there, it will come right out. So now we know that we can take these out, and then when we get it through the hole, we can put it back together on the other side. Let's do it with the real unit. First, we're going to pull out the red piece in the center. Next, we're going to see if we can loosen the rubber piece back here. Now, before we take this loose, let's go ahead and mark the colors in the order of the colors of the wires. So, we've got blue and gray and red and black. So we'll make sure we put them back together the same way it comes apart. Okay, now that we've got that settled, we can start disconnecting the little wires. Just be sure you pack your patience. Got the first one out. Got the second one out. Got number 3. One more. And there we have it. Now we can put the wire in the car. Now we have our wire prepared to go back into the truck, so it can fit through the hole without the connector on it. Alright, now I've got the wire through the hole, and I can put the connector back on it. Alright, so the blue and the gray go on the top, the red and the black go on the other side. Make sure that all 4 wires go back into their connectors and connect. And there we go. Now, all four are back in their spots. So, now I'm going to reinsert the little red piece. And there it is, just like that. Now, there's one last part, is to put the back in. And now the back is back together. Now that we've got the wires through, let's get them plugged back in. Alright, those are plugged back in. And we'll connect it back to his mount. Now that we have the wires secured, we can put the cover on the back side of the timing belt. Okay, so let's put the fasteners back in for the timing belt back cover. I got the back of the timing belt cover secured. I got the accessory gear back in place. And so now we can start putting on the timing belt. So in goes the new tensioner. Okay, now with it just a little bit loose, I'm going to put tension on the tensioner. I'm going to pull it back as far as we can. And I'll tighten it up. Alright, so let me point out what we're looking at. See, here is our crankshaft, and we can see the key on the top here. Now, what we're looking for is not the key, but there's this little arrow, this little triangle on this tooth right here. And you see this little notch? That notch and the tooth where the little triangle is should line up together. Next, we determine that our camshaft is at top dead center as well. So if you look at the mark here, we want to make sure that it lines up with this little groove on the timing belt cover. It's a little bit off. I'm going to turn it ever so slightly. Okay, now we have another way to check it as well, which I'll show you in just a moment. Now we've got our timing set on the top, our timing set on the bottom, and we have our tensioner pulley pulled back. So now we can install our new timing belt. So I'm going to start at the bottom, around the sprocket on the crankshaft. With it on the bottom sprocket, I'm going to work it over here onto my accessory. I'm going to work up to the right. There. And I want to make sure I don't have any extra space between those two. I'm going to come up here to my camshaft, and I'm going to make sure that the teeth go into the teeth of the gear. I come on around my gear, making sure all the teeth are seated in there. I'm going to come around, I'm going to put it on my tensioner. And notice that it's nice and loose. Okay? Because I have my tensioner tightened down in the loose position. Now, I'm going to double check and make sure I got everything. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take my wrench and I am going to loosen my tensioner. And with that tensioner loose, it's going to spring back into place and it's going to put tension on it automatically. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my wrench, I'm going to put it on the crankshaft, and I'm going to go through one full revolution on the camshaft, which is going to be 2 revolutions at the bottom. And I'm going to crank it only to the right. You never go backwards because that will loosen the belt. Okay, so we're going to go around one full turn up here, and then we're going to check and see if the timing marks line up. And I got it exactly lined up here. So I'm going to look at the bottom, and it is off. So the one at the bottom is too far forward. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to take the tension back off the belt and move it a couple of teeth and try it again. We'll get our big screwdriver. Now let me just say something about this right here. They have some special tools for doing this. You can just use a big screwdriver. Now I've seen where people will take all these accessories off so they can get behind it, and they'll put a bolt with a socket on there to cinch it down, and that will push the tensioner over as well. But I've discovered it's not so hard to do it with a big screwdriver. So I'm just going to get my big screwdriver in there and just push it over till it's all the way loose, and then we'll tighten up the bolt. And that bolt will hold it in place so we can work with it. All right, so with that, notice that we're loose. Now, below, it was too far in advance. So I need to come backwards with this one on the top. So I'm going to take this very carefully off, and I'm going to turn this top camshaft. We'll just go about 1 tooth or so, and we'll try that. We've got the belt back on there. Let's put the tension back on it. Let's go around another time and see if our timing lines up. Get right on it, right exactly on it, up here, and let's see what it looks like below. I'm 2 teeth off at the bottom, so I went the wrong way. So we're going to have to do this whole thing again and make sure that we go the correct way on the top. Grab my wrench. This time I'm going to go the other way. There we are. And now we'll go around 2 times again. Let me get it right on my mark at the top. There, we're right smack on it. Now let's check the bottom. Now I'm right smack on my mark here, and right smack on my mark on my crankshaft. Now there's one more thing that I picked up along the way doing a little research on this car, is that you can take your dipstick, which I got right here, and when you think you've got it lined up there, I'm going to put the dipstick across the center of the accessory gear and across here. And the timing belt mark, or the timing mark, should be directly behind the dipstick, which it is. That tells me that we're right smack on. So I've got it aligned just perfectly. Okay, now with the right amount of tension on the belt, which the tensioner provides, just by releasing the pressure here, we can now tighten up this bolt. And now the tensioner is set in place with the right amount of tension on it, and the belt is happily in its place. One of the challenges that you're going to face with taking the timing belt off of a Ford Ranger 2.3 liter engine, especially the 91 and on cars that have the coil packs, is you're going to have to get the harmonic balancer and the hub and the sensor out without damaging them. So let me show you what that's all about. Now first, you're going to have your crank pulley. Now on the back side of your crank pulley is going to be your hub. Now this hub is a very important piece, and it sits inside here like this. It only goes one way because there's a pin on it. Now what you can do when you're pulling this is you can pull it all off at once by taking the instead of taking all 4 bolts out, just take 2 on opposite sides and then use your harmonic balancer puller and pull this whole unit as one. Or you can take this piece off and then use your harmonic balancer puller to pull this off. Now there's a couple of things that you need to know when you're pulling this piece off. If you use a wheel puller is going to grab on the outside and it may bend these vanes on the inside. That's really important that you don't bend these, because these are what tell the sensor what the position of the crankshaft is. So if we bend them, we're going to ruin it. Okay, and that's exactly what happened on this car. You can see there's a dent in this side over here where somebody had taken a screwdriver and tried to pry it out. You're not going to pry this thing out with a screwdriver, let me tell you that. And so you don't want to use a puller either, because you don't want to damage these vanes. Now, so you put your harmonic balancer puller on it, and you pull this thing off, and then behind it you've got the sensor. Now I've got a sensor right here so that I can show you. Now what this sensor does is it rides between those vanes, and as it turns it senses the position. So you can see there's 4 cylinders, so there's 4 positions, 1, 2, 3, 4, and it just senses which vanes it's seeing, and it sends that message to let the engine know, or to let the computer know what cylinder it's on. So this guy has got to ride on there without touching. Now I'm noticing that since I'm playing with these, that this is magnetic. So it's going to want to cling to one side or the other, and we don't want it to do that. Okay, so now we've gotten our harmonic balancer out of the car. Next, we want to get the sensor out. And the sensor is mounted in this little bracket that you see right here. So you take out these 2 bolts and the sensor comes right out. If we look at this bracket, we can see that there are 3 holes in the bottom. Now this 3rd one in the middle is not a bolt, that's a pin. So you'll take these 2 bolts out, take those out, and then you'd think you just remove it, but it doesn't remove very easily. You got to wiggle it and get it off of this pin in order to get it out. Once you've got the sensor out, then you can take off this ring that you'll find around the crankshaft in front of the gear. Now this little ring has got a flange in it. It's really important. What it is a guide for the timing belt so that the timing belt doesn't walk back and forth. So this will prevent the timing belt from walking, so make sure you got to get that back in there, and you got to get it in the correct way with the flange facing away from the belt. Another thing that I discovered along the way is that well, this car was caked with so much dirt and grease you couldn't see anything. So when I cleaned it off, I noticed on the coil packs themselves that the coil packs are labeled 1, 2, 3, and 4. So you can make sure that you get the timing correct. Now, as I told you earlier, all the wires were in the wrong place. Let's get ready to install the Harmonic balancer hub, the sensor, and get ready to finish this job. I installed a new air filter and put the air intake back together. I installed the spark plugs and new spark plug wires and made sure that they are all connected properly. I put a new thermostat in the thermostat housing. We also repainted the thermostat housing. Okay, so we're going to start assembling all the parts that go on the crankshaft. We're going to start with the timing belt guide. Now, just so you know, I had put the big bolt back in to the crankshaft so that I could turn the crankshaft when I was setting the timing. So we need to get that back out of there real quick. Okay, so we've got that bolt out. And we'll set that aside for just a moment. Now we can put in our timing belt guide. And with that guide in there, now I can put in my bracket that we talked about. So I'm going to hold the sensor to one side and I'm going to put my bracket in. It's so much nicer now that I've cleaned it all up. I've got to find that little pin that it mounts on. There we go. Once you got it on its little pin, it'll slide right into place. And then you just have to line up the bolt holes in order to get those two bolts in there. Alright, now I've got my hub. Now I'm going to take just a little tiny bit of grease on my fingertip, not very much, and I'm just going to run it around the inside and smooth it out real good. This is just going to make it easier to get the hub back on the crankshaft. There we are, that's nice and smooth. And we'll put the bolt back in. Now we're going to turn the bolt in and it's going to press the new hub back into place. Let me show you what's going on now. I've got the new hub installed. Here's the old one. And I've got the new sensor installed. Now let me show you what's going on down there, because you can't really see it through the camera. What's happening is I've got this thing in there, but they're misaligned just a little bit, and the outer ring of the hub is hitting on the side of the housing. It's not supposed to hit, it's supposed to go between without touching. So I'm going to adjust this very slightly. Now what I've done is I've devised my own way of measuring that little gap. I'm just taking a razor blade and I'm going to make sure that that razor blade will fit between there. And it does. Now that's on the outer ring. So I'm going to turn it to where I can see the inner ring. I'm going to check it on the inside. There we are. And I can see it. I can see a gap all the way through. I'm going to go around to the next position. Check it. And I'll come around to the end. And everything seems to be just fine. So I am going to stop there, and I'm going to finish tightening up my little sensor. Now I've run it through twice just to make sure, and it looks like everything is spot on. So I'm ready for the next step. Now we're going to put the crank pulley back on. And I threw some paint on it. Okay, now I'm just tightening up the battery. I'm going to put this one top hose in. I'm going to leave the fan and a couple of the accessories off and the serpentine belt off. I'm going to try to start the car, and if it runs good, then we're going to shut it down, put everything else back in. If it's not running, then we'll do some troubleshooting. We'll put this hose in so it doesn't spray water everywhere. We've come to the end of the first part of the Make It Run phase of the Ford Ranger project. As you can see, the truck is running great. We still have a lot of things to do with it. So look for more episodes in the future on the truck, and let us know what your questions are. So until next time, we'll see you right here on the American Garage.
Thanks for watching the American Garage. If you like this video, hit the like button and leave your comments below. And don't forget to subscribe.